Hello, I'm showing my recent progress towards building a 1911 completely out of paper. This is my first update for YouTube. This is not my first attempt at doing this, however. This is probably my fourth attempt at building a 1911 lower out of paper. This is one of my first attempts. As you can see, I didn't get too far with it. It's mostly made out of cardboard. You can see there's a sear in there. And I built it basically out of like cereal boxes, just trying to get a feel for the shape and how the thing is constructed. It's fairly flimsy. It's not that solid. I mean, you can see when I squeeze it up there that it's just not as strong. We'll go and disregard that. This was my second build, and this actually came out pretty well overall. It's very strong. I can't bend it. Um, the only downside to it is that it's thick. It's nearly an inch thick, and a 1911 frame is actually about 3/4 of an inch thick. And so it may not look horrendous, and when you look at it on the side, but when you look at it overall and you hold it, you feel it. It feels very black and very thick. And especially if I were to throw a pair of grip handles on each side, it would become way too thick, and then you would lose the whole a lot of the effect of the thing looking realistic. So I was thinking that I could use this ultimately for a final build, but I had to stop and realize that I had made it about 1/4 of an inch too thick. This is my final build that I'm working on. It is accurate in terms of dimensions. I bought a set of calipers from Cabela's. If you're doing anything with papercraft, I'd recommend that you buy a set of calipers. They're about $20–25 or so for just a regular pair like this, and they're extremely useful when you're reading blueprints. I'll show you a little bit of just kind of the tools I use. This is a file I found on CNC Gunsmithing. It is actually, you can download it and run it. You don't need anything other than Windows. It's a .exe program, and if you look up CNC Gunsmithing on Google, and you can find a 1911 file on this, and basically you can click and rotate and change frames and pan, tilt, zoom, all that sort of thing. And what's nice about it is that you can actually look in all the crevices and see exactly how the gun is constructed, which if you're trying to build it, gives you an idea of what the inside looks like. And also, another thing is you'll need a set of actual blueprints to scale. And again, you can see these measurements here. I would highly recommend using a set of calipers when you're trying to figure out what these measurements are. And this was also found on CNC Gunsmithing, so that gives you an idea of just kind of how I was able to get my information is basically from one website. And again, this is the current frame I'm working on. I found the best way to construct it was to start by making a template like that. That's all correct dimensioned, and then to simply build it up until I get the correct layer. It's just paper with Elmer's glue. It's all Elmer's glue, just regular glue, and this is probably the best glue that you can use for a project like this. Is just regular cheap Elmer's glue all. And what you do is you just build up layers to get to the correct layer, and then you make a few main key pieces and then attach it to this type of layer. For example, I made a magazine well out of basically just took layers of paper and glue, curved it around the shape of a magazine that was the correct dimension, and then glued it to the frame. And you can just kind of see how that was put together. I also made this area here, which will ultimately hold the sear, disconnector, the hammer, and then the grip safety, as well as I cut the notch in there for the safety. I didn't drill it through all the way through the other side yet, but I will soon. Um, Another thing on topic of drilling, I do have a Dremel tool that I use for some of this, especially for making some of the rough cuts, as you can see around here, but I find overall that it's much better to use um, a small set of regular needle files to do a lot of the work, simply because you have a lot more control, and the needle files work really well on paper. And I mean, just to give you an idea of the hardness, you can kind of hear it's pretty solid. So my next step, also the trigger guard. I mean, you can see as a close-up, basically it's all stacked paper, and I have a hole there for the magazine release, which should be a pretty easy job. I was reading up on about how it's built, and that's what it looks like so far. Now this is over here. That's just kind of an outline for the template that I used, that I initially drew based off blueprints. Another way to draw an outline like this is to take is to take the blueprints online and literally just trace over them on a sheet of paper. You adjust the blueprints on your computer screen to the correct scale with a set of calipers. Basically, make sure the measurements are correct to the caliper, and then simply trace it on a piece of paper, and that gives you your blueprints. Again, you're working with paper, so it's a really easy way of doing things. This is a slide. I probably won't continue to use it, but just to give you an idea, and to give myself an idea, of what it would take to have a slide. This is an actual 45 ACP round, which is nice. This is the barrel. You can see there's the two lugs in there that the barrel locks into, and then this is the barrel. The barrel is easier than you'd think. It's chambered, so it will hold around correctly. As you can see, it's flush. It picks up and drops pretty easily. And basically, I just to make the 45 caliber barrel correctly, I own a 45 caliber handgun, not a 1911, but a 45 caliber handgun, and I just was able to build a rod that was the correct width to fit inside of it, and then I wrapped paper around it, and that was exactly 45 caliber diameter. Then I wrapped more paper on this end to build a supported breech, and I flared it out over here to support the chamber so the bullet will go in without falling through. So it's the inside is correct. It's not rifled or anything. I saw no need to rifle it, but it's pretty strong. And you can see the lugs are pretty well done. And I made the lug cuts just by filing down. Basically taking a file and just going down like that to just create the lugs, and it wasn't too difficult. That hole, it needs to be replaced. I'll just probably break that off with a knife and put a new piece on to hold the link, which will then fit to that hole there. So overall, I'm pretty pleased with it. Oh, also with the extractor, I made an extractor out of JB Weld. That's the only other thing I've used in here that's not Elmer's glue or paper is JB Weld, and I only use it for a few parts here and there. And the extractor, I'll show you real quick. Basically, you just take it apart. Hold on a second, let me put the camera down. Okay, so the extractor comes out. There's the firing pin channel, and that's the back end of the extractor there. So take the extractor out, simply push in on it, and then pull it out of the back. And it comes out, and that's basically it. As you can see, it's a hairpin with JB Weld on the end, and then I simply filed the JB Weld until it was in the shape of the extractor, which was much easier than it sounds. And then I wrapped paper around the end and used some JB Weld to actually adhere the paper to the metal of the hair clip, and just simply wrapped it in a circle and then filed it in the correct shape so that it can be locked into the back of the slide by the firing pin stop, which is that piece there. So that's, if that gives you an idea. And again, this is pretty easy. Actually, the slide I made by taking a spine of a book, and just wrapping paper over it, and that gave me the shape of the inside of the spine. The spine gave me the shape of the inside of the slide, and that made it very simple for me to just build up on that, just one layer at a time. A quick word on paper. I use a combination of just regular printer paper, which, you can just find recycle bins, but I also combine it with a heavier bond paper, not paper board, not something as firm as that, but just a slightly thicker, very matte paper that will absorb glue well, but because it shortens the process. If you make everything just out of printer paper, you're going to spend a lot of time putting together layers. But if you use other materials, such as like a matte, kind of like a thicker stock paper, I'm not good at paper weights. I know what the stuff looks like at my craft store, but you may not have access to it. Just use a thicker paper, a thicker white paper, mix it with printer paper, and that'll give you strength and thickness to let you build quick. Actually, what's funny is that I spent months building all these stupid junk frames that I can't use anymore, and then this one here that's actually going to turn out just about perfect. It only took me probably a week to get this far with it, which isn't very long at all. And my next update, I should have the lower frame assembled, and I should have some of the components in it. This year here, which I'm making a new one, I'm making out of JB Weld. I actually just made a hunk of JB Weld, which is like an epoxy adhesive. I poured it into a plastic container, and then broke the plastic container off around it, and then I was stuck with this big gob of JB Weld, and I literally just filed it down with needle files just till it took this shape, and then I'm just going to keep filing until it's a sear, because it's hard to make a small intricate part out of paper, and I worry that it would break, as opposed to making one out of JB Weld, which is pretty strong. It's like a little rack. That's going to hold up a lot better to repeated use, because I want to be able to shoot this and Ultimately, that's my plan, is to have a functioning, shootable 1911 made out of paper. Obviously not firing real high pressure rounds, but just very low pressure cap rounds out of it, which would be entertaining for me. So my next update, I should have the lower frame assembled, and over the next few updates, I'll be providing some tutorials and how I do things and how I put it together. And just stay tuned for more updates. Bye.